Well, we've been hopping all over the place talking to entrepreneurs, and my name is Jeffrey Davis. This is Radio Entrepreneurs. Thank you very much for being one of our hundreds of thousands of listeners. And I want to thank our hosts, the wonderful law firm of Tarlow, Breed, Hart, and Rogers. I love this conference room. It's great being here without a deposition. And I want to thank my co-host, Mark Furman.
Jeffrey, great to be with you.
Thank you very much. It is nice to be here without a deposition. I like doing radio shows from this conference room. You're probably not used to this room not being billable.
That's right.
So, sorry for the jokes. Our next guest, thanks to the fabulous Mark Z, is Ellen Waldorf, founder and principal, eWaldorf Mediation. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So what do you want to tell us about eWaldorf Mediation?
Well, I'm a mediator, which means that I help people problem solve. Most of my work is related to families, both divorcing and intergenerational conflicts. And I am an attorney, but I realize I love problem solving and being a neutral and helping people figure out solutions more than advocating for one person or the other. There's no problem I'm not interested in solving.
So has the world of mediation changed a lot in the last 5 to 10 years?
I think it has. I think it's changed in a few ways. I think one way that it's changed is there are more mediators. And I think that both attorneys and I think the general public, both being, executives as well as, families like I work with, are aware of mediation as a tool that's, one of many, like litigation. I'm not someone who's anti-litigation. I think litigation, just like mediation, has its place. But recognizing that most people, they care about the outcome. They don't really care as we professionals care about the process. So I think there is more interest in it that is being generated by clients. And I think there are more professionals who are adding it to their toolbox in terms of lawyers or therapists or business professionals who it's another service that they can provide their clients.
Is there a typical time in the process that you like to get involved, or a time that you more often than not do get involved?
I think it varies a lot. I think, what I encourage people to do, particularly when it comes to, estate planning or other, or when parents are providing gifts to adult children of money. I think the more that families can talk proactively about things, the less likely there will be litigation on the other end when people get upset that their expectations weren't met. But I think more typically, as you probably aren't surprised, people get involved in mediation when there is a conflict. We are getting separated. We are getting divorced. We are fighting over the fact that you have something uneven in the estate, or you had undue influence on our parent. So it's more common, I think. But the other thing too, what I encourage people to do in conflicts is that mediation, in the family context, unlike in business where generally it's like we're sitting in a conference room and we're going to mediate, as long as it takes today to get this resolved, or we come to the conclusion it won't be. In family mediation, people often see family mediators over time. So I encourage people to come early in the process and kind of thinking of staging the mediation. What is it really the next steps? What information needs to be gathered? Who are the right people for the conversation? What's the information that we need, or the issues, so that people have time to think about things. But I do see people at all different stages, people who've started litigating. Most of my clients have not started the litigation process at the time that they engage me.
I do a lot of work with shareholders that are not appreciating each other anymore.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And family businesses where I get embroiled in the family conflict over an extended period of time,
Right.
trying to unravel that.
Yeah.
Do you get involved in the corporate world as well in similar situations?
I used to be a corporate lawyer, so my interest has always been in doing that kind of thing. And I think particularly with shareholders and family businesses, the importance of having conversations earlier rather than at the point of crisis is so important because we know inevitably people will retire, people will change their interests or their focus, they'll want to step back from the business or want to, pursue a different approach. So I think it's especially important that the sooner people can have that conversation, the better. Because once, as you know, you're in a crisis where someone is, someone has retired or someone is turning over, a piece of the business to the one child who is participating in the business and the other children feel like they've been slighted or there's an estate, it gets much more complicated and more ugly. And so I think the more that families and business partners can have discussions about what is the process that we're going to use to disengage, how are we going to treat people and doing that proactively. I think it's a huge distraction from businesses to deal with these crises.
It is, and I handle business disputes between companies, disputes between partners or estate type or trust disputes. So, I'm a great believer in pre-litigation mediation. The earlier, the better. And being brutally honest with the clients about actually what the dispute resolution process is like if you can't settle the case. So, for example, we have a court system in Massachusetts that treats cases that involve $25,000, the same set of rules as if it's $25 billion. And, being cost effective for the amount in controversy isn't really a consideration as to how the rules are written. And then with the existence of electronic communications, which can mean that they're the equivalent of 50 or 100 bankers' boxes of emails, and it's just astounding how different it is from when I started practicing law in terms of costs.
I also think clients don't often appreciate, I find a lot of my time is educating clients about the legal process because I think people need to know the options. And I don't think people realize, having spent, my early law years doing due diligence before there was all this it is endless. So I don't think people fully appreciate that. It's only after the fact that people realize, oh my gosh, 2 years have gone by and we're still waiting.
I think the after the fact, and I learned this from Mark Furman, and I'm not just saying that, I did, is the biggest problem for me because when I go into businesses and there's no operating agreement,
all the time,
and the shareholders agreement is ambiguous at best. They're sort of in this permanent filibuster, and there's no way to resolve it without almost destroying the business if it isn't a big company.
Right.
And it's really quite painful for all parties. And and I learned that from Mark. You really got to look at the documentation, and you really do need to do that up front.
And actually, you when you talk about the ambiguous, my original thought when I went to college was I was going to be a computer science major, and one of the things you learn when you do programming is the importance of thinking step by step. And so I think that really benefits me in mediation when I see people who sometimes post-divorce, for instance, or post-whatever, where they have ambiguous language in a contract where there's no detail, where there's an assumption that we know what that means. And I think different parties need different levels of detail, but to think step by step and realize just to say, oh, we're going to work this out.
I come across this all the time.
Right.
I get introduced by partners, and they show me the operating agreements and the shareholders agreements, and I'm thinking, oh boy, I'm not the Messiah. I mean, these contracts are going to make it impossible to resolve anything because all the person has to say is, I'm not interested.
Right. I think, and having been someone who started out learning drafting contracts, there are things in business considerations about punting, what's worth our time now. And oftentimes at the beginning, there is not a great, as you know, because you're brought in conflicts all the time, there's not a lot of energy. You want to do the tasks that are going to grow the business, but putting on just like long range planning that thinking about disengaging, thinking about a shareholders agreement needs to be a regular thing, and it needs to be revisited too as changes in the business.
My mother used to say not all relationships are equal, and most of the time when I come into a relationship, when somebody is the, let's say, weaker end of the partnership, they're the one who doesn't want to negotiate because they're making out too well.
Yeah.
But Ellen, I have to ask you before you leave, it says here in your bio, David Letterman. Tell us about David Letterman. That probably will get the most interest.
You actually are correct. When I was in college, I thought I wanted to produce sitcoms, and so
I still do.
Yeah, well, excellent. Well, you and I won't do that in the future together. But
I want to do improv.
Yeah, I did improv in college, actually. Not well, so I was fortunate enough to get a fellowship, and they arranged for me to do an internship one summer. Summer's not a great time to be an intern. There's not much going on. They were on vacation a lot. So
you didn't get to interact a lot?
No, actually at the time they had some terrible incident the year before, and so we weren't even allowed to be in the studio. And there were too many interns and not enough work to do. But actually I didn't go into doing into the entertainment business, but it did help me get jobs in the law.
I'm really impressed, and I would say my whole life has been a bad attempt at improv. So, every day of my life has been an improv, and I think I'm mediocre at best. So
but
that's what Rich Hirschen would say.
Yes. Well, but I do think actually in my work, and probably, in your work as well, one does need to be able to be flexible. And I think improv, actually that experience and being comfortable with the fact that even though we prepare for mediations, that we have to anticipate the curveball and respond effectively.
I got a call 6:30 last night from a boardroom filled with people. Can we talk? And I'm thinking, right on the spot, you got to be ready.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I do actually. I've recommended to people to take acting classes and different things who are in business and learning how to present and deal with people. So, but if somebody's looking for you, we've been speaking with Ellen Waldorf, founder and principal, eWaldorf Mediation. If someone's looking for you, how would they find you?
They can find me under the web at eWaldorfMediation.com. My office is in Newton, and if you look for Divorce Mediator Newton on Google or just Mediator in Newton, Massachusetts, I'll come up as well.
So, great.
If I can be of help, and I'm always glad to talk with people, because sometimes I'm not the right professional, and I want to be able to make sure that people are thinking through, what is am I the right fit? And if I am, great, I'm glad to help. And if not, let's send you to the right professional who can help you with what your problem is.
We want to thank Mark Z from Mark Z Legal Staffing for introducing you to us. And we appreciate that. And I want to thank Rich Hirschen, who showed up today, also one of our sponsors of the show. But most of all, I want to thank Mark Furman and the law firm of Tarlow, Breed, Hart, and Rogers. Thank you, Mark, for sponsoring us.
Thank you.
And thank you both. What a pleasure to be here.
Thanks. Again, this is Radio Entrepreneurs, and if you're not connected to us on YouTube and LinkedIn, I think you're missing out on a good opportunity to stay informed. So try it, and I think you'll like it. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back after these messages.